Nero Wolfe and the Penthouse puzzle. It was a Friday in early November, and I was at my desk in the office, sorting through invoices from our recent cases when Caesar's head came up from where he'd been resting near the hall entrance. His ears swiveled forward, and a moment later, Apollo was on his feet too, moving toward the front windows with that restless energy he always had when something caught his attention. The buzzer sounded before I could get up. Through the bulletproof glass panel beside the door, I could see a woman on the stoop, mid-30s, expensively dressed in a camel-colored coat with a fur collar and carrying herself with the kind of posture that suggested she'd been to finishing school. Her face was composed, but I could see the tension in the way she gripped her handbag. I opened the door as far as the chain bolt allowed. "Yes? I need to see Nero Wolfe." Her voice was cultured, with the kind of diction that came from private schools and summer homes in the Hamptons. "My name is Beatrice Ashford. It's about a murder." I've heard that opener before, roughly 100 times, but something about the way she said it, calm, almost clinical, made me pause. Mr. Wolfe doesn't see anyone without an appointment, and he's currently in his plant rooms. He won't be available until 11. She glanced at her wristwatch, a delicate gold Cartier that probably cost more than my car. "It's 10:40 now. I can wait." "But Mr. Goodwin." She paused, and I realized she knew my name. The man who was murdered was my brother-in-law. He was killed in his penthouse apartment 4 days ago. The police have closed the case, calling it suicide. But it wasn't suicide, it was murder, and I can prove it. That got my attention. The police don't usually close murder investigations by calling them suicide unless they have good reason. They have excellent reason. My brother-in-law, Desmond Ashford, was found in his locked penthouse apartment on the 28th floor of the Meridian Tower on 5th Avenue. The door was bolted from the inside. The windows were closed and locked. There was a gun in his hand and a bullet in his brain. The medical examiner ruled it self-inflicted, and the case was closed within 48 hours. But you don't believe it. I know it wasn't suicide, Mr. Goodwin. Desmond Ashford was many things, arrogant, ruthless, and thoroughly unpleasant, but he wasn't suicidal. He was murdered, and whoever did it made it look like he killed himself. The police won't listen to me, but Nero Wolfe will. I studied her through the glass. She didn't look like someone peddling fantasies or conspiracies. She looked like someone who'd spent 4 days trying to get the police to listen and had finally run out of patience. "Come inside," I said, releasing the chain bolt. "But make your movements slow. The dogs take their job seriously." I opened the door, and she stepped into the hall with careful dignity. Caesar rose to his full height, 95 pounds of muscle and quiet authority, and moved to intercept her. Mars positioned himself 3 feet behind me, and Minerva hung back near the office door, watching with that calculating intelligence she always showed with strangers. Diana had already circled around to check the side angle, and Apollo returned from the window to monitor the front door. Loyal, our brick-red pit bull, padded over from where he'd been lying near the coat rack. He stopped in front of Mrs. Ashford, looked up at her with those sharp, intelligent eyes, and sniffed the air carefully. His brass name tag, engraved with 918 West 35th Street, New York, beneath the name Ella Weil, tooled into his leather collar by Fritz, caught the light from the hall chandelier. "They're beautiful," Mrs. Ashford said quietly. "Are they all guard dogs?" "They're family," I said, "and yes, they guard the house. Don't make any sudden moves, and we'll all get along fine." I led her down the hall to the office, where the morning sun was streaming through the bulletproof windows overlooking West 35th Street. The bulletproof mirror above the couch reflected her elegant profile as she entered. She glanced at it briefly, then took the red leather chair I indicated without being asked. Caesar settled on the floor between her chair and the hall entrance. Mars positioned himself near the doorway. The others dispersed to their usual stations, except for Loyal, who sat beside my desk and kept his eyes on Mrs. Ashford. I pulled out my notebook. "All right, Mrs. Ashford. Start from the beginning. Who was Desmond Ashford, and why are you convinced he was murdered?" She opened her handbag, pulled out a pair of white gloves, and smoothed them over her lap, a delaying tactic, I thought, while she organized her thoughts. "Desmond Ashford was my late husband's younger brother. My husband Philip died 3 years ago. Desmond and Philip were partners in Ashford Properties, a real estate development company that owns several buildings in Manhattan. When Philip died, his shares passed to me. That made Desmond and me partners, though he resented it deeply." "Why did he resent it?" Because he believed I had no business being involved in the company. He thought I should sell him my shares and disappear quietly into widowhood. When I refused, he made my life difficult. He blocked decisions, withheld information, and did everything he could to force me out. But you stayed. I stayed. Philip built that company from nothing, and I wasn't about to let Desmond destroy it out of spite. I wrote it down. Tell me about the penthouse. Desmond lived alone in a penthouse apartment on the 28th floor of the Meridian Tower. It's one of the buildings our company owns. The penthouse takes up the entire floor, 6,000 square feet, private elevator access, spectacular views of Central Park. Desmond moved there 2 years ago after his divorce. Private elevator access? You mean he had his own elevator? Yes. The building has a main elevator bank that serves floors 1 through 27. But the 28th floor, Desmond's penthouse, is only accessible via a private elevator that requires a key. Without that key, you can't reach the penthouse. That was interesting. Who had keys? As far as I know, only 3 people: Desmond himself, the building superintendent, and Desmond's housekeeper. What about you? As a partner in the company that owns the building? She shook her head. Desmond never gave me a key. He was paranoid about his privacy. All right. What happened 4 days ago? Monday night? Monday night, Desmond had dinner alone in the penthouse. His housekeeper, Mrs. Dunning, left at 8 o'clock, as she always did. She locked the apartment door behind her and took the private elevator down. The next morning, when she returned at 9, she found the apartment door bolted from the inside. She used her key to unlock it, but the chain bolt was engaged. She had to call the superintendent to break the chain. And when they got inside, they found Desmond in his study. He was sitting in his chair behind his desk, slumped forward. There was a gun in his right hand, a .38 revolver he kept in his desk drawer, and a bullet wound in his right temple. The medical examiner said he died sometime between 9 and 11 Monday night. The windows, all closed and locked. The study is on the south side of the penthouse, 28 floors up. There's no fire escape, no balcony, no way to access it from outside. The main door was bolted from inside. The police examined everything and concluded it was suicide. I leaned back in my chair. Mrs. Ashford, I have to ask, what makes you so certain it was murder? Everything you've described points to suicide, or at least to a locked room situation that the police couldn't explain any other way. She reached into her handbag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. This is why. I took it and unfolded it. It was a letter, typed on expensive stationery with Ashford Properties embossed at the top. The text was brief. Beatrice, I've made arrangements to transfer Philip's shares back to company control. You'll receive fair compensation, but the partnership ends next week. I'm tired of fighting you, and I've found a solution that works for everyone. We'll sign the papers Friday afternoon at my attorney's office. Desmond, I read it twice. When did you receive this? It was delivered to my apartment by messenger on Monday afternoon, 6 hours before Desmond died. Do you still have the envelope? She pulled it out and handed it to me. The envelope was addressed to Mrs. Beatrice Ashford at an address on Park Avenue with no return address. The postmark was Monday, November 1st. And did Desmond's attorney know anything about this? I called him Tuesday morning, after I heard about Desmond's death. He said he knew nothing about any share transfer or any meeting scheduled for Friday. He said Desmond hadn't contacted him in weeks. I studied the letter again. So either Desmond lied to you in this letter, or someone else wrote it. Exactly. And Mr. Goodwin, if someone else wrote it, that means they were planning something. They lured me into thinking the conflict with Desmond was about to be resolved. Then they killed him and made it look like suicide. Why would they do that? Because with Desmond dead, his shares passed to his daughter, Constance. She's 23, fresh out of college, and has no idea how to run a real estate company. Whoever controls Constance controls half of Ashford Properties. And who would want to control the company? Several people. Desmond's former business manager, who was fired 6 months ago. A rival developer who's been trying to buy us out for years. Even Desmond's ex-wife, who would do anything to hurt him. Or, she paused, or someone inside the company. We have 3 vice presidents, all of whom would benefit from Desmond's death and my potential removal from the partnership. I wrote down the names as she gave them. Constance Ashford, daughter. Fletcher Doyle, former business manager. Bernard Crane, rival developer. Lucille Ashford, ex-wife. 3 VPs, Gerald Thorne, Natalie Pierce, Duncan Vale. The sound of the elevator descending from the plant rooms hummed through the house. Caesar's ears perked up, and Loyal shifted his weight beside my chair. A moment later, the elevator stopped, and I heard Wolfe's slow, measured tread coming down the hall. He entered the office, all 1/7 of a ton of him, moving with the careful precision of a man who knows exactly how much space he occupies. He was wearing a brown shirt, which meant Fritz had rotated the laundry, and he had a sprig of Cattleya trianae in his lapel, a purple orchid with a yellow throat that looked like something out of a tropical dream. He glanced at Mrs. Ashford, glanced at me, and frowned. Then he moved to his desk, settled into his chair with a faint grunt, and arranged himself like a mountain, preparing to stay put for the duration. "Archie," he said without looking at her, "who is this?" "Mrs. Beatrice Ashford. She has a problem involving a locked penthouse, a dead brother-in-law, and a letter that may or may not be forged. The police say suicide. She says murder." Wolfe's eyes flicked to Mrs. Ashford, studied her for 3 seconds, taking in the expensive coat, the composed posture, the controlled tension, and then returned to the morning mail I'd left on his desk. "No," he said. Mrs. Ashford blinked. "No? No. I am not interested in locked room mysteries, penthouse puzzles, or theories about forged letters. If the police have closed the case, they undoubtedly have good reason. Good day, madam. I can pay you $50,000. Wolfe's hand paused over an envelope. He didn't look up. For what? Precisely. To prove my brother-in-law was murdered, to identify his killer, and to ensure that whoever orchestrated this doesn't get away with it. Wolfe set down the letter opener. "Mrs. Ashford, $50,000 is a considerable sum, but it will not induce me to climb 28 floors to examine a penthouse apartment, interview witnesses in locations inconvenient to reach, or waste my time on a case the police have already resolved to their satisfaction. You wouldn't have to go to the penthouse. I'll bring everyone here. The housekeeper, the superintendent, the business associates, anyone you want to question. And Mr. Wolfe," she leaned forward slightly. "The police closed this case because it was convenient. A locked room, a gun in his hand, no evidence of foul play. But I know Desmond. He was planning something for Friday. He wouldn't have killed himself before seeing it through. Someone murdered him, and they did it in a way that made the police stop looking. If you don't help me, they'll get away with it." Wolfe was silent for a long moment, fingers interlaced over his belly, staring at nothing. Then he sighed. "Very well, I will consider it. But first you will answer several questions truthfully and completely. If I detect evasion or deception, you will leave immediately, and the matter will be closed. Understood?" "Understood." "Good. First question. Did you murder your brother-in-law?" Mrs. Ashford didn't even blink. "No." "Did you hire anyone to murder him?" "No." "Do you benefit financially from his death?" "Indirectly. With Desmond gone, I'm no longer fighting him for control of the company. But his shares pass to his daughter, not to me, so my financial position is essentially unchanged." "Who inherits the penthouse?" "It's owned by Ashford Properties, so technically the company owns it. But Constance, as Desmond's heir, would have the right to live there if she wanted." "Does she want to?" "I have no idea. I haven't spoken to her since the funeral." Wolfe leaned back in his chair. "Mrs. Ashford, your brother-in-law was murdered in a locked penthouse apartment on the 28th floor of a building with private elevator access. The door was bolted from inside. The windows were locked. There was a gun in his hand. These facts suggest either suicide or an extraordinarily clever killer. If it was murder, the killer had to enter the penthouse, shoot Desmond, arrange the scene to look like suicide, and then exit, all while leaving the door bolted from inside and the windows locked. How do you propose that was done?" "I don't know. That's why I need you." "Then let me ask you this. Who had access to the penthouse that night?" "As far as I know, only Desmond. The housekeeper left at 8. The superintendent was in his apartment on the ground floor all evening. The police verified it, and no one else had a key. Except the killer," Wolfe said quietly, "who either had a key or found another way in." Mrs. Ashford nodded. "Exactly." Wolfe picked up his beer glass. Fritz must have brought it while we were talking, and drank. He set it down, wiped his lips with a handkerchief, and looked at me. "Archie, escort Mrs. Ashford to the front room. I need to think." I stood. "Does that mean you're taking the case?" "It means I am considering it. Mrs. Ashford, you will remain here while I deliberate. If I decide to accept, you will pay me a retainer of $10,000 immediately, and you will provide Archie with a list of everyone connected to your brother-in-law family, business associates, employees, anyone who might have wished him dead. If I decline, you will leave and seek assistance elsewhere. Is that acceptable?" "Yes." "Then go. Archie will fetch you when I've decided." I led Mrs. Ashford to the front room, a smaller, more formal space we used for clients who needed to wait. She sat on the couch, and I left her there with the door open. Caesar followed me back to the office and resumed his post near the hall entrance. Wolfe was leaning back in his chair, eyes closed, fingers interlaced, lips pushing in and out, his thinking pose. I sat at my desk and waited. After 5 minutes, he opened his eyes. "Archie, what do you think?" "I think Mrs. Ashford is telling the truth about the letter. I think Desmond Ashford was murdered, and I think whoever did it is very clever. Clever enough to make it look like suicide in a locked room 28 floors up." "Do you think we can identify the killer?" "If anyone can, you can, but it'll take legwork. I'll have to interview everyone connected to Ashford, visit the Penthouse building, talk to the police. It won't be easy." Wolfe grunted. "It never is. Very well. Tell Mrs. Ashford I accept the case. Get the retainer, the list of names, and any other information she can provide. Then call Saul Panzer. I want him to investigate the Penthouse building, the superintendent, the elevator system, the access points. Someone found a way into that apartment, and Saul will discover how." I grinned. "You're taking it because of the locked room, aren't you? You can't resist a good puzzle." "I am taking it," Wolfe said irritably, "because $50,000 is a considerable sum, and because Mrs. Ashford is correct. The police closed this case prematurely. Now go. I have work to do." I went to the front room and told Mrs. Ashford the news. She looked relieved, wrote me a check for $10,000, and spent the next 20 minutes giving me names, addresses, and background on everyone connected to Desmond Ashford. By the time she left, it was past noon, and I had 4 pages of notes and a case that promised to be complicated, dangerous, and if I was being honest, more interesting than anything we'd handled in months. A locked penthouse, a clever killer, and Nero Wolfe sitting in his chair, already 3 steps ahead of everyone else. It was going to be a hell of a week. After Mrs. Ashford left, I returned to the office and found Wolfe reading through the list of names she'd provided. He had his magnifying glass out and was examining the paper as if it might contain hidden messages written in lemon juice. "Anything interesting?" I asked, dropping into my chair. "Several things. First, the list is thorough. Mrs. Ashford has provided not only names, but also relationships, potential motives, and relevant details. She is either exceptionally organized or exceptionally suspicious, or both." "Indeed." "Second, there are 8 people on this list who had reason to want Desmond Ashford dead. That is a considerable number of suspects for a single murder. Maybe he was just that unlikable." Wolfe set down the magnifying glass. "Archie, being unlikable is not sufficient motive for murder. People tolerate unpleasant relatives, difficult business partners, and contentious ex-spouses every day without resorting to homicide. For murder to occur, there must be something more: money, power, revenge, or fear. Our task is to determine which of these 8 people had sufficient motive and opportunity to kill Desmond Ashford in his locked penthouse. And how do we do that from here? We can't bring the penthouse to the brownstone." "No, but we can bring the people." Mrs. Ashford agreed to arrange interviews here. "I want you to contact each person on this list and schedule them to come here Monday through Wednesday of next week. Space them out, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon. That will give us time to assess each one individually before confronting them collectively." I pulled out my calendar. That's 8 people over 3 days. It's doable, but some of them might not want to come. Then persuade them. Tell them Nero Wolfe is investigating Desmond Ashford's death at the request of Mrs. Beatrice Ashford, and their cooperation is expected. If they refuse, note it and inform me. Refusal to cooperate is often as informative as cooperation itself. I started making a list. What about the penthouse itself? Don't you want me to go up there and look around? Eventually. But first I want information. Saul will investigate the building's access points and elevator system. You will interview the people who knew Desmond best. And I will sit here and think. About what? About locked rooms, Archie. About how a killer enters a space that is secured from inside, commits murder, and then exits while leaving everything locked behind them. There are only a limited number of ways to accomplish that, and I intend to identify which method was used in this case. The phone rang. I answered it. Archie Goodwin. Goodwin, it's Kramer. Inspector Kramer's voice sounded like gravel being ground in a cement mixer. I hear Wolfe's been hired to look into the Ashford case. You want to tell me what the hell that's about? I glanced at Wolfe, who was pretending to read his mail, but was obviously listening. Mrs. Ashford thinks her brother-in-law was murdered. She hired Mr. Wolfe to investigate. The case is closed, Goodwin. Suicide, clean as they come. Mrs. Ashford doesn't think so. Mrs. Ashford is wrong. Desmond Ashford shot himself in his locked penthouse apartment. The medical examiner confirmed it. There's no evidence of foul play, no sign of forced entry, and no reason to think anyone else was involved. Tell Wolfe to drop it. You know I can't tell Mr. Wolfe what to do, Inspector, but I'll pass along your opinion. Kramer growled something unprintable and hung up. I turned to Wolfe. Kramer wants you to drop the case. He says it's suicide, clean as they come. Inspector Kramer is a competent detective, Wolfe said, but he suffers from a fatal flaw. He accepts the obvious. A locked room with a gun in the victim's hand appears to be suicide, therefore he concludes it is suicide. He does not ask the more interesting question, which is, if it was murder, how was it done? That question, Archie, is what separates a good detective from a great one. Kramer sees a locked door and stops thinking. I see a locked door and start thinking. I had to grin. So you've already figured out how the killer got in and out? I have several theories, but theories are worthless without evidence. That is where you come in. I need you to gather facts, Archie. Not speculation, not assumptions, but concrete, verifiable facts. Interview the housekeeper who found the body. Interview the superintendent who broke the chain. Interview anyone who saw Desmond Ashford on the day he died. And when you return, bring me evidence I can use. What kind of evidence? The kind that proves or disproves my theories. Now go. Call Saul, schedule the interviews, and prepare for a busy week. I spent the rest of the afternoon on the phone. Saul Panzer agreed to start investigating the Meridian Tower building first thing Saturday morning. I scheduled interviews with the 8 suspects for Monday through Wednesday, 2 per day, 1 at 10 in the morning and 1 at 3 in the afternoon. Most of them agreed readily enough, though Fletcher Doyle, the fired business manager, demanded to know why he should cooperate with a private snoop when the police had already closed the case. I told him that refusal to cooperate would be noted, and he grudgingly agreed to come in Tuesday afternoon. By the time I finished, it was nearly 6 o'clock, and Fritz announced dinner. Wolfe rose from his chair and headed to the dining room, where he proceeded to consume braised short ribs, roasted root vegetables, and a chocolate mousse with the same methodical precision he applied to solving murders. I ate too, but my mind was on the case. A locked penthouse, 8 suspects, and a letter that might be the key to everything, or might be nothing at all. After dinner, Wolfe returned to the office and I cleared the table. At 7:30, I sat down at my desk and reviewed the notes I'd taken from Mrs. Ashford. The suspects. Constance Ashford, daughter, age 23, inherits Desmond's shares in Ashford Properties. Fletcher Doyle, former business manager, fired 6 months ago, holds a grudge. Bernard Crane, rival developer, has been trying to buy Ashford Properties. Lucille Ashford, ex-wife, bitter divorce, still fighting over money. Gerald Thorne, VP of Ashford Properties, ambitious and calculating. Natalie Pierce, VP of Ashford Properties, came up through the ranks. Duncan Vale, VP of Ashford Properties, close friend of Desmond's. Mrs. Dunning, housekeeper, found the body, had access to the penthouse. 8 people. 8 possible killers, and somewhere among them, one person clever enough to commit murder in a locked room 28 floors above the street. I looked at Wolfe. He was reading an orchid catalogue, completely absorbed. Any thoughts on which one did it? I asked. Several, but thoughts are not facts, and I do not speculate without evidence. Monday, when the interviews begin, We will start eliminating possibilities. By Wednesday, we should know who killed Desmond Ashford and how they did it. And if we don't? Wolfe looked up from his catalogue. Then Archie, we will have failed, but I do not intend to fail. Locked rooms are not unsolvable puzzles. They are simply problems that require more thought than the average detective is willing to invest. Fortunately, I am not the average detective. I couldn't argue with that. Wolfe returned to his catalogue, and I went upstairs to bed. As I lay there in the dark, I thought about penthouses and locked doors and clever killers who thought they'd committed the perfect crime. They hadn't counted on Nero Wolfe. And that, I thought as I drifted off to sleep, was their first mistake. Saturday morning, I was up early. Fritz made breakfast, scrambled eggs, sausage and toast with his homemade blackberry jam, and by 8:30 I was in the Huron sedan, heading uptown toward Fifth Avenue. The Meridian Tower was impossible to miss. It was one of those gleaming Art Deco buildings that went up in the 30s, all limestone and setbacks, with a green copper roof that caught the morning sun. The lobby was marble and brass, with a doorman in a burgundy uniform who looked like he'd been hired for his ability to intimidate unwanted visitors. I gave him my name and told him I was there to see the building superintendent. He made a phone call, and 5 minutes later, a compact man in his 50s appeared from a door marked "Staff Only." He had iron-grey hair, a weathered face, and the look of someone who'd spent 40 years fixing other people's problems. "Mr. Goodwin? I'm Patrick Hennessy, building superintendent. Mrs. Ashford called and said you'd be coming by." We shook hands. His grip was firm and calloused. "I appreciate you taking the time, Mr. Hennessy. I'm investigating Desmond Ashford's death on behalf of Mrs. Beatrice Ashford. She has some questions about how it happened." Hennessy's expression darkened. "The police say it was suicide." "The police are often right, but sometimes they're not. I'd like to ask you a few questions, if you don't mind." He hesitated, then nodded. "All right, come on back to my office." He led me through the staff door, down a narrow hallway, and into a small cluttered office that smelled of coffee and machine oil. We sat, and I pulled out my notebook. "Mr. Hennessy, tell me about the penthouse. How does someone access it?" "There's only one way, the private elevator. It's separate from the main elevator bank. You need a key to operate it, and without that key you can't get to the 28th floor." "Who has keys?" "3 people had them. Mr. Ashford, Mrs. Dunning the housekeeper, and me. That's it." "What about a master key? Something that would work on all the elevators?" "There's no such thing. The private elevator has its own lock mechanism, separate from the main system. You need the specific key. Could someone pick the lock?" Hennessy shook his head. "It's a Medico lock, one of the best made. You'd need specialized tools and a lot of time, and you'd have to do it in the lobby where anyone could see you." "What about the fire stairs? Could someone climb up from floor 27? "The fire stairs stop at 27. The penthouse is sealed off. There's no stairwell access. Mr. Ashford insisted on it when he moved in. He was very particular about his privacy." I wrote it down. "Tell me about Monday night." "The night Mr. Ashford died." Hennessy pulled out a logbook and flipped through it. "Mrs. Dunning left the penthouse at 8:05. She took the private elevator down, locked it in the lobby, and left through the main entrance. The doorman on duty, that would be Marcus Webb, saw her leave. After that, nobody went up or came down until Tuesday morning." "You're sure?" "Positive. I was in my apartment on the ground floor all evening. The doorman was at his post in the lobby. The private elevator stayed locked in the lobby all night. Nobody used it." "What about the windows? Could someone have climbed up from outside?" "Mr. Goodwin, the penthouse is on the 28th floor. The windows are sealed units. They don't open more than a few inches for ventilation. And even if you could pry one open, you'd need climbing equipment and a death wish. There's no fire escape, no balcony, nothing to hold on to. It's not possible." I leaned back in my chair. "Mr. Hennessy, someone once told me that when you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. You're telling me it was impossible for anyone to enter or exit that penthouse Monday night, so either Mr. Ashford killed himself or the impossible happened." Hennessy looked uncomfortable. "I know how it sounds, but I'm telling you, there's no way anyone could have gotten in there. The police examined everything. The elevator, the locks, the windows, the door to the apartment itself. They found nothing. What about the chain bolt on the apartment door? Mrs. Ashford said it was engaged when you and Mrs. Dunning found the body. That's right. The door was bolted from inside. I had to break the chain to get in. Could someone have engaged the bolt from outside using a string or a wire? Not this bolt. It's a heavy-duty chain with a slide mechanism. You'd have to be inside the apartment to engage it. I made a note. All right. Walk me through Tuesday morning. What happened when Mrs. Dunning arrived? Hennessy consulted his log again. Mrs. Dunning arrived at 8:45. She took the private elevator up to the penthouse, used her key to unlock the apartment door, but found the chain bolt engaged. She called down to me on the house phone, and I went up with bolt cutters. We broke the chain and went inside. And found Mr. Ashford? In his study, slumped over his desk, gun in his right hand, bullet wound in his right temple. We called the police immediately. Did you touch anything? Nothing. We backed out and waited for the cops. What about Mrs. Dunning? How did she react? She was shaken but not hysterical. She's worked in service for 30 years. She's seen things before. But finding your employer with a bullet in his head is never easy. I flipped to a new page. Tell me about Desmond Ashford. What kind of man was he? Hennessy shifted in his seat. Mr. Ashford was demanding. He expected things done exactly his way, and if you didn't meet his standards, he let you know. But he paid well and on time, and he didn't cause trouble in the building. That counts for something. Did he have visitors? Not many. He was private. Occasionally his daughter would visit. His business associates came by sometimes, but mostly he kept to himself. What about Monday? Did anyone visit him that day? Hennessy checked his log. His daughter Constance visited him Monday afternoon around 3. She left at 4:30. After that, nobody until Mrs. Dunning arrived to make his dinner. Did Constance seem upset when she left? I didn't see her leave. The doorman might have. I made a note to check with the doorman. One more question, Mr. Hennessy. Do you think Desmond Ashford killed himself? He was quiet for a long moment. Mr. Goodwin, I've been superintendent of this building for 15 years. I've seen a lot of people come and go, and I've learned that you can't always tell what's going on inside someone's head. Mr. Ashford seemed fine on Monday, no different than any other day, but that doesn't mean he wasn't planning to kill himself. People hide things. They smile when they're dying inside. So yes, I think he could have killed himself. But do I know for sure? No. Nobody knows for sure except Mr. Ashford, and he's not talking. It was an honest answer, and I appreciated it. I thanked Hennessy for his time and asked if I could speak with Mrs. Dunning. She's not here today, but I can give you her address. She lives in Queens. He wrote it down for me. And Mr. Goodwin, if you find out something the police missed, I'd like to know. Mr. Ashford wasn't a warm man, but he didn't deserve to die like that. I left the Meridian Tower and drove to Queens. Mrs. Dunning lived in a modest apartment building in Jackson Heights, a far cry from the luxury of Fifth Avenue. I climbed 3 flights of stairs and knocked on her door. A woman in her 60s answered. She was short, stout, with steel grey hair pulled back in a bun and shrewd blue eyes that assessed me in 2 seconds. Mrs. Dunning? I'm Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe. Mrs. Beatrice Ashford hired us to investigate Desmond Ashford's death. May I come in? She studied me for another moment, then stepped aside. You might as well. The police have been here twice, and I've told them everything I know. But if Mrs. Ashford wants to waste her money hiring a private detective, that's her business. Her living room was neat and spare, with doilies on the furniture and a cross on the wall. We sat, and I pulled out my notebook. Mrs. Dunning, how long did you work for Mr. Ashford? 5 years. I was his housekeeper from the time he moved into the Meridian Tower. What were your hours? Monday through Friday, 9 to 8. I'd arrive in the morning, clean the apartment, do the shopping, and prepare his dinner. I'd leave at 8 sharp every night. And weekends? Mr. Ashford didn't want anyone around on weekends. He said he needed his privacy. Tell me about Monday. What happened that day? Mrs. Dunning folded her hands in her lap. I arrived at 9, same as always. Mr. Ashford was in his study working. I cleaned the apartment, did some laundry, and started preparing dinner around 5. He wanted roast chicken with potatoes. I served him at 7 in the dining room, and he ate alone, same as always. How did he seem? Normal. He didn't talk much. He never did. But he wasn't upset or agitated. He ate his dinner, thanked me for the meal, and went back to his study. I finished cleaning up, and I left at 8:05. Did he have any visitors that day? His daughter came by in the afternoon. I let her in around 3, and she left before I started dinner. Did you hear what they talked about? No. They spoke in his study with the door closed, but I heard raised voices at one point. That was interesting. Raised voices? Were they arguing? I couldn't make out the words, but yes, it sounded like an argument. How did Constance seem when she left? Upset. Her face was red, and she left without saying goodbye to me. She just stormed out. I wrote it down. What happened Tuesday morning? I arrived at 8:45. I took the private elevator up, used my key to unlock the apartment door and found the chain bolt engaged. I knew immediately something was wrong. Mr. Ashford never engaged the chain while I was expected. I called Mr. Hennessy, and we broke the chain together. And then, we found Mr. Ashford in his study, dead. I've worked in service for 30 years, Mr. Goodwin, and I've seen my share of tragedies. But that, she paused, and her eyes went distant. That was different. Different how? He looked peaceful, like he was sleeping. But the gun in his hand and the blood on his desk, it was wrong. All wrong. Mrs. Dunning, do you think he killed himself? She looked at me for a long moment. Mr. Ashford was not a happy man. He had everything money could buy, but he wasn't happy. So yes, I suppose it's possible he killed himself. But Mr. Goodwin, I worked for that man for 5 years, and in all that time, I never once saw him give up on anything. He was stubborn, difficult, and mean when he wanted to be, but he didn't quit, and suicide is quitting. It was the second time someone had said that. I was starting to think Mrs. Ashford might be right. I asked a few more questions about the layout of the penthouse, about Ashford's routine, about whether anything seemed out of place on Tuesday morning, and then I thanked her for her time. As I was leaving, she stopped me at the door. Mr. Goodwin, if someone killed Mr. Ashford, I want to know. He wasn't a kind man, but he deserved better than being murdered in his own home. You find out who did it, and you make sure they pay. I promised I would. I got back to the brownstone around 2 in the afternoon. Caesar met me at the door, tail wagging, and Loyal trotted over to press his head against my leg, his way of asking where I'd been. I scratched behind his notched ear and headed to the office. Wolfe was at his desk with a glass of beer, reading what looked like architectural drawings. He glanced up when I entered. Well, I dropped into my chair and gave him the full report. My conversations with Hennessy and Mrs. Dunning, the details about the private elevator and the locked chain bolt, Constance Ashford's visit on Monday afternoon, and the argument that Mrs. Dunning had overheard. When I finished, Wolfe set down the drawings and leaned back in his chair. Interesting. So the daughter visited her father hours before his death, they argued, and she left upset. That bears investigation. Mrs. Dunning said Constance looked angry when she left, and Hennessy confirmed she was there from 3 to 4:30. What time did Ashford die? The medical examiner put it between 9 and 11 Monday night, 6 hours after Constance left. Wolfe's fingers drummed on the arm of his chair. Archie, the penthouse has only one means of access, the private elevator. According to both witnesses, that elevator remained locked in the lobby from the time Mrs. Dunning left at 8:05 until she returned Tuesday morning. Correct? That's what they say. And the apartment door was bolted from inside, with a chain that could only be engaged from within the apartment. Right. Then either Desmond Ashford killed himself, or someone found a way to circumvent those security measures. The question is how. He picked up the architectural drawings. These are the building plans for the Meridian Tower. Saul obtained them from the City Records office this morning. I've been studying them. I got up and looked over his shoulder. The drawings showed floor plans for all 28 floors, with the penthouse taking up the entire top level. It was a sprawling space with 6 rooms, a master bedroom, a guest bedroom, a study, a dining room, a kitchen, and a large living room. The private elevator opened directly into a foyer. Notice anything unusual? Wolfe asked. I studied the plans. The penthouse is completely self-contained, no connecting doors to other apartments, no shared hallways, The only entrance is through the private elevator. Exactly, which means the killer had to use that elevator or find another route we haven't considered yet. What other route? Hennessy said, there are no fire stairs to the penthouse, and the windows are sealed units 28 floors up. Then we are missing something, Archie, and until we discover what it is, we cannot solve this case. He set down the plans. What did Saul report this morning? He called while you were in the plant rooms. He's been investigating the elevator system. He says the private elevator is exactly as Hennessy described. Separate lock mechanism, requires a specific key. No master override. He's going to check with the elevator maintenance company to see if there's any way to bypass the lock. Good. And the interviews? All confirmed for Monday through Wednesday. Constance Ashford is coming Monday at 10, Fletcher Doyle at 3, Gerald Thorne Tuesday at 10, Natalie Pierce Tuesday at 3, Duncan Vale Wednesday at 10, Bernard Crane Wednesday at 3. Mrs. Dunning agreed to come back Tuesday at 10. I scheduled her right after Thorne, and Lucille Ashford, the ex-wife, is coming Wednesday afternoon at 3:30. Wolfe nodded. That gives us 3 days to question 8 people. By Wednesday evening, we should have sufficient information to identify the killer. You make it sound easy. It is not easy, but it is systematic. We will ask each person where they were Monday night, what their relationship with Desmond Ashford was, and whether they had reason to want him dead. Then we will compare their answers, identify inconsistencies, and determine who is lying. And what if they all tell the truth? Wolfe's eyes gleamed. Archie, in my experience, everyone lies. The trick is determining which lies matter. That evening, Fritz prepared veal scallopine with lemon and capers, roasted asparagus, and a raspberry tart that was so good I had 2 slices. After dinner, Wolfe and I returned to the office, and I spent an hour typing up my notes from the day's interviews. At 8 o'clock, the phone rang. It was Saul. Archie, I talked to the elevator maintenance company. They service all the elevators at the Meridian Tower, including the private one to the penthouse. I asked about bypass methods, and the foreman said there's no way to operate that elevator without the key. He was very definite about it. What about picking the lock? He says it would take an expert at least 20 minutes, and you'd have to do it in the lobby where the doorman could see you. Not practical. So we're back to the locked room puzzle. Looks like it. But Archie, I did find something interesting. The elevator maintenance logs show that the private elevator was serviced 3 weeks ago. Routine inspection. The technician who did the work is a guy named Leo Farrell. I'm going to track him down tomorrow and see if he noticed anything unusual. Good work, Saul. Let me know what you find. I hung up and relayed the conversation to Wolfe. He listened, nodded, and returned to his book, a monograph on South American orchids that had arrived that afternoon. I went upstairs around 10, took a hot shower, and climbed into bed. As I lay there in the dark, I thought about locked penthouses and private elevators and clever killers who made the impossible look easy. Somewhere in the facts we'd gathered, there was a clue, something we'd overlooked or hadn't asked about yet. I fell asleep thinking about it. Monday morning arrived cold and clear. I was at my desk by 8:30, reviewing my notes and preparing for the day's interviews. Wolfe came down from the plant rooms at 11 sharp, settled into his chair, and poured his first beer of the day. At 10 minutes to 10, the buzzer sounded. I checked the glass panel and saw a young woman on the stoop, early 20s, dark hair, expensive coat, and a face that would have been pretty if it weren't so drawn and pale. Caesar and Mars were on their feet immediately. I opened the door, let Constance Ashford inside, and the dogs inspected her with their usual thoroughness. She stood very still while they sniffed her coat and handbag, and when they were satisfied, I led her to the office. Wolfe barely glanced at her as she took the red leather chair. He finished his beer, set down the glass, and finally looked up. Miss Ashford, thank you for coming. I am investigating your father's death at the request of your aunt, Mrs. Beatrice Ashford. I have several questions for you. Constance's voice was soft but steady. My aunt told me she hired you. I'm not sure what you expect to find. The police said my father killed himself. The police are often correct, but not always. Miss Ashford, when did you last see your father? Monday afternoon. I visited him at the penthouse around 3 o'clock. What was the purpose of your visit? She hesitated. I wanted to talk to him about the business, about Ashford Properties. What specifically? I wanted him to explain how the company worked. After my father's divorce, I inherited his shares. That makes me a partner, along with my Aunt Beatrice. But I don't know anything about real estate development. I thought my father could teach me. And what was his response? Constance's jaw tightened. He told me to stay out of it. He said the business was too complicated for me to understand, and I should leave it to the professionals. When I insisted, he got angry. He said I was wasting his time. Did he say anything else? He said, she paused, and I could see her fighting back emotion. He said I was just like my mother, weak and useless, that I'd never amount to anything. Then he told me to leave. And you left? Yes. I was furious. I slammed the door on my way out. Wolfe studied her. Miss Ashford, were you aware that your father was planning to meet with Mrs. Beatrice Ashford on Friday to discuss transferring her shares? No. He never mentioned it. Did your father discuss business matters with you? Never. He barely spoke to me at all unless I initiated the conversation. How would you characterize your relationship with him? Constance looked down at her hands. Distant. Cold. My parents divorced when I was 15, and after that I only saw my father a few times a year. He paid for my education, gave me an allowance, but he wasn't a father. Not really. Did you love him? She looked up, and her eyes were hard. No, Mr. Wolfe. I didn't love him, but I didn't kill him either, if that's what you're asking. Where were you Monday night between 9 and 11? At home, in my apartment on East 64th Street. Alone. Can anyone verify that? No, I live alone. Wolfe leaned back in his chair. Miss Ashford, as your father's heir, you inherit his shares in Ashford Properties. That makes you quite wealthy. Do you benefit from his death? Financially, yes. Emotionally, no. Mr. Wolfe, my father, was a terrible man. He was cruel, selfish, and vindictive, but he was still my father, and no amount of money makes up for losing a parent, no matter how difficult they were. It was a good answer, honest, direct and self-aware. I watched her carefully, looking for tells, but she seemed genuinely shaken. Wolfe pressed on. Did your father have any enemies? Dozens. He made enemies the way other people make friends. Business rivals, former employees, ex-wives. He burned bridges everywhere he went. Did anyone threaten him recently? Not that I know of, but he wouldn't have told me if they had. What about Fletcher Doyle? I understand he was your father's business manager until 6 months ago. Constance nodded. Fletcher was with Ashford Properties for 10 years. My father fired him over some financial discrepancy. Fletcher claimed he was innocent, but my father didn't believe him. Was Fletcher angry? Furious. He threatened to sue for wrongful termination. My father laughed at him. And the 3 vice presidents, Thorne, Pierce, and Vale, they all wanted my father's job. He knew it, and he enjoyed keeping them under his thumb. He'd dangle promotions in front of them and then pull them away at the last minute. It was cruel, but that's how he operated. Which of them would benefit most from his death? All of them. With my father gone, they have a chance to advance. But Mr. Wolfe, wanting someone dead and actually killing them, are 2 different things. Indeed they are. One more question, Miss Ashford. Did your father keep a gun in his penthouse? Yes, a revolver. He kept it in his desk drawer in the study. He showed it to me once when I was a teenager. He said it made him feel safe. Did he have any training with firearms? I don't think so. He just bought it and kept it there. Wolfe nodded. Thank you, Miss Ashford. That will be all for now. If I have additional questions, Archie will contact you. She stood, and I walked her to the door. As she was leaving, she turned back to me. Mr. Goodwin, I meant what I said. I didn't love my father, but I didn't kill him. I hope you believe that. I believe you believe it, I said. Whether it's true is another matter. She left, and I returned to the office. Wolfe was making notes on a pad of paper. What do you think? I asked. I think Constance Ashford is intelligent, honest, and emotionally complicated. I also think she had motive and no alibi. She cannot be eliminated as a suspect. She didn't seem like a killer to me. Killers rarely do, Archie. That is why they succeed. At 3 o'clock, Fletcher Doyle arrived. He was in his mid-40s, stocky, with thinning brown hair and the look of a man who'd spent too many years kissing up to a boss who didn't appreciate him. He took the red leather chair with the attitude of someone who resented being there. "I don't know what you expect me to tell you," he said before Wolfe could ask a question. "Desmond Ashford fired me 6 months ago over some accounting nonsense. I hadn't spoken to him since." "Accounting nonsense?" Wolfe asked mildly. "He accused me of embezzling funds from the company. It was complete fabrication. I managed Ashford Properties for 10 years, and every penny was accounted for. But Desmond wanted me gone, so he invented a reason." "Why did he want you gone?" Doyle's face flushed. "Because I questioned his decisions. He was making risky investments, taking on too much debt, and I told him he was going to sink the company. He didn't like being contradicted, so he fired me." "Did you sue for wrongful termination?" "I tried. My attorney said I didn't have a case. Desmond had covered his tracks too well." "Were you angry?" "Damn right I was angry. I gave that man 10 years of my life, and he threw me out like garbage. But being angry doesn't mean I killed him." "Where were you Monday night between 9 and 11? "Home with my wife. We watched television and went to bed around 10:30. "Can your wife verify that?" "Of course. Call her if you want." Wolfe made a note. "Mr. Doyle, as business manager, you had access to the company's financial records. Did Desmond Ashford have any debts or financial troubles?" Doyle hesitated. "Define trouble." "Large debts, loans he couldn't repay, business deals that went sour." "He had debts, sure. The company always carried debt. That's how real estate works. But nothing that would drive him to suicide, if that's what you're asking." "I'm asking if anyone had financial leverage over him." "Not that I knew of, but I've been out of the loop for 6 months. You'd have to ask Thorne or Vale. They're running the show now." "What about Bernard Crane? I understand he's been trying to buy Ashford Properties." Doyle nodded. "Crane's been circling for years. He wants the company's portfolio, prime Manhattan real estate. But Desmond wouldn't sell. He said he'd burn the company to the ground before letting Crane have it." Strong words. Desmond was a strong personality. He didn't compromise. "Did Crane make threats?" "Not that I heard. But Crane's smart. If he wanted Desmond gone, he'd find a way that didn't lead back to him." Wolfe asked a few more questions, but Doyle didn't have much else to offer. When he left, Wolfe looked at me. "Another suspect with motive and opportunity. This case is becoming crowded." "Too many suspects?" "No such thing, Archie. But it does complicate the process of elimination." That evening, Saul called with an update. He'd tracked down Leo Farrell, the elevator technician who'd serviced the private elevator 3 weeks ago. "I talked to him this afternoon," Saul said. "He said the elevator was in perfect working order. No problems, no unusual wear, nothing out of the ordinary." "Did he notice anything else? Anyone watching him work? Anyone asking questions?" "No. He said it was a routine job. He was in and out in 30 minutes. "All right, thanks, Saul." I hung up and went upstairs to bed. Tomorrow would be another long day of interviews, and I needed to be sharp. Because somewhere in all these conversations, there was a clue. A slip of the tongue, a contradiction, a detail that didn't fit. And when we found it, we'd have our killer. Tuesday morning started with Gerald Thorne. He arrived at 10 sharp, tall, silver-haired, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people earned in a month. He had the kind of polished confidence that came from decades in corporate boardrooms, and he took the red leather chair like he owned it. Wolfe studied him for a moment, then spoke. "Mr. Thorne, thank you for coming. I understand you're a vice president at Ashford Properties." "That's correct. I've been with the company for 15 years. What are your responsibilities?" "I oversee acquisitions and development. When the company buys a property, I manage the renovation and preparation for lease or sale." "Profitable work?" "Very. Ashford Properties has one of the strongest portfolios in Manhattan." "And now that Desmond Ashford is dead, what happens to the company?" Thorne's expression didn't change. "That depends on Mrs. Beatrice Ashford and Miss Constance Ashford. They're the majority shareholders now. If they want to sell, we sell. If they want to continue operations, we continue." "And what do you want?" "I want to keep the company running. I've invested 15 years of my career in Ashford Properties, Mr. Wolfe. I'm not ready to see it liquidated." "Would you benefit from Desmond Ashford's death?" Financially, no, I don't inherit anything. But professionally, yes. Desmond was a difficult man to work for. He micromanaged everything, second-guessed every decision, and made it clear that we were all replaceable. With him gone, the company can operate more efficiently. Did you dislike him? I didn't have to like him. I just had to work for him. Wolfe leaned forward. Mr. Thorne, where were you Monday night between 9 and 11? At home with my wife. We had dinner, watched some television, and went to bed. Can she verify that? Of course. Did you visit Desmond Ashford's penthouse Monday? No. Have you ever been to the penthouse? Twice. Once for a business meeting, once for a company dinner. Both times I used the private elevator with Desmond's permission. Do you have a key to that elevator? No. Only Desmond, the housekeeper, and the building superintendent had keys. Wolfe made a note. Mr. Thorne, did Desmond Ashford have any enemies who might have wanted him dead? Thorne smiled thinly. Mr. Wolfe, Desmond made enemies every day. Business rivals, former employees, contractors he'd sued, tenants he'd evicted. The list is long. Anyone specific? Bernard Crane, for one. He's been trying to buy us out for years. Desmond hated him. Anyone else? Fletcher Doyle. Desmond fired him 6 months ago, and Fletcher took it hard. He sent threatening letters to the office. We had to involve the police. That was new. What kind of threats? Nothing specific, just vague statements about making Desmond pay and getting what he deserved. The police warned him to stop, and he did. Wolfe asked a few more questions, but Thorne didn't offer much else. When he left, I looked at Wolfe. He's smooth. Too smooth. Wolfe agreed. He answered every question without hesitation, which suggests either he's innocent or he's rehearsed his responses. You think he's lying? I think everyone is lying about something, Archie. The question is what? At 3 o'clock, Natalie Pierce arrived. She was in her late 30s, attractive in a businesslike way, with auburn hair pulled back in a bun and sharp green eyes that missed nothing. She sat in the red leather chair and crossed her legs with the confidence of someone who'd fought her way up the corporate ladder. Mrs. Pierce, Wolfe began, you're a vice president at Ashford Properties. How long have you been with the company? 12 years. I started as an administrative assistant and worked my way up. Impressive. What are your responsibilities? I manage tenant relations and property operations. If there's a problem with a building, I fix it. Did you have a good relationship with Desmond Ashford? Pierce's expression hardened. No. Desmond didn't believe women belonged in executive positions. He made that clear from the day I was promoted. Yet he kept you on. Because I'm good at my job. The tenants loved me. The buildings ran smoothly, and the numbers spoke for themselves. Desmond couldn't fire me without looking like a fool. Did you want him dead? She didn't flinch. I wanted him out of my way. But wanting someone dead and killing them are two different things. Where were you Monday night? At the office. I was working late on a tenant dispute. I left around 10:30 and went home. Can anyone verify that? The night security guard saw me leave. His name is Raymond Tucker. Wolfe made a note. Did you visit Desmond's penthouse Monday? No, I hadn't been to the penthouse in months. Do you have a key to the private elevator? No. Mrs. Pierce, did Desmond Ashford have any business dealings that might have led to his death? She considered the question. Desmond was involved in a lot of projects. Some of them were risky. About 6 months ago, he started negotiations with Bernard Crane about a potential merger. Crane wanted to buy out Ashford Properties, but Desmond wanted to stay independent. The negotiations fell apart, and Crane was furious. How furious? Furious enough to threaten legal action. He claimed Desmond had wasted his time and damaged his reputation. It got ugly. Ugly enough for murder. I don't know, but Crane is ruthless. If he thought killing Desmond would give him access to Ashford Properties, I wouldn't put it past him. Wolfe asked more questions about the company's finances, Desmond's business practices, and the other suspects. When Pierce left, I turned to Wolfe. She's sharp, and she's not afraid of you. No, which makes her either innocent or very clever. He glanced at the clock. It's nearly 4. We have 2 more interviews tomorrow. Prepare accordingly. That night, I reviewed my notes from the day's interviews. Thorne had alibis but no passion. Pierce had passion but no key to the penthouse. Constance had motive but seemed genuinely grieved. And Doyle had anger but claimed he was home with his wife. 4 suspects down, 4 to go. And somewhere in this mess, a killer was hiding. Wednesday morning brought Duncan Vale, the 3rd vice president. He was different from Thorne and Pierce, younger, more casual, with sandy hair and an easy smile that seemed genuine. He took the red leather chair and looked around the office with interest. "Nice place," he said. "I've heard about Nero Wolfe, but never thought I'd end up in his office." Wolfe ignored the pleasantry. "Mr. Vale, you were a friend of Desmond Ashford's, is that correct?" Vale's smile faded. "Friend is a strong word. We were colleagues who got along better than most. Desmond and I went back 20 years. We met in business school." "Did you socialize outside of work?" "Occasionally. We'd have dinner once a month, play poker with some other guys from the industry. Nothing too personal, but more than just business." "Did you visit his penthouse?" "A few times, usually for poker games." "Did you have a key to the private elevator?" "No. Desmond always let me up when I arrived." "Mr. Vale, where were you Monday night between 9 and 11? "Playing poker. We had a game at my apartment on West 72nd Street. 4 guys, me, 2 developers I know, and an architect friend. We played from 8 until midnight." "Can they verify that?" "Absolutely. Call any of them." Wolfe made a note. "What was your relationship with Desmond like in the days before his death?" Vale shifted in his chair. "Strained. We'd had a disagreement about a property acquisition. I thought we should pass on a building in Midtown too expensive, too many problems. Desmond wanted to buy it anyway. We argued about it last week, and he basically told me to shut up and do what I was told." "Were you angry?" "Frustrated, more than angry. That was typical Desmond. He didn't listen to anyone." "Did you think he was making a mistake?" "I knew he was making a mistake, and I told him so. But Desmond always thought he was the smartest guy in the room." "Mr. Vale, do you think Desmond Ashford killed himself?" Vale was quiet for a moment. "I don't know. Desmond was under a lot of pressure. The company had debts, there were tenant problems in 3 of our buildings, and Bernard Crane was threatening to sue us over the failed merger. But suicide, I don't see it. Desmond was too stubborn to quit." "Who do you think killed him?" "If I had to guess, Crane. He had the most to gain. With Desmond dead, Ashford Properties is vulnerable. Crane could swoop in, buy out the new shareholders, and take over the whole portfolio. It's exactly the kind of move he'd make." "Do you have any evidence?" "No, just instinct." Wolfe asked more questions, but Vale stuck to his story. "When he left, I looked at Wolfe. He's got an alibi." "Yes, which means either he's innocent or he had an accomplice." Wolfe leaned back in his chair. "Archie, we now have 7 suspects. 3 have solid alibis. Doyle, Thorne, and Vale. 4 do not. Constance, Pierce, and 2 we haven't interviewed yet. That narrows the field considerably. Unless one of the alibis is fake." "Precisely. Which is why you will verify each alibi. Call the poker players. Call Doyle's wife. Call the security guard who saw Pierce leave the office. I want confirmation." I spent the next hour making phone calls. Doyle's wife confirmed he was home Monday night. The security guard confirmed Pierce left the office at 10:30, and Vale's poker buddies all confirmed he was at the game from 8 until midnight. 3 solid alibis, which meant 3 innocent suspects. That left Constance, Pierce, who could have returned after 10:30, Crane, and Lucille Ashford, the ex-wife I'd be meeting in an hour. At 3:30, Lucille Ashford arrived. She was in her early 50s, elegantly dressed, with platinum blonde hair and a face that had been well maintained through expensive cosmetics and possibly surgery. She took the red leather chair with the air of someone who was used to being admired. "Mr. Wolfe," she said, her voice smooth and cultured, "I understand you're investigating Desmond's death. I'm not sure why anyone would think it was anything other than what it appeared to be." "And what did it appear to be, Mrs. Ashford?" "Suicide. Desmond was depressed, isolated, and buried in work. He shot himself. It's tragic, but not surprising." "Were you aware he was depressed?" "I hadn't spoken to Desmond in 3 years, Mr. Wolfe. Not since the divorce was finalized. but I knew him well enough to know when he was under pressure. What was the nature of your divorce? Her smile turned cold, contentious. Desmond tried to cut me out of everything. He claimed I was entitled to nothing because I'd signed a prenuptial agreement. I hired an attorney and fought him for 2 years. In the end, I got a settlement, not as much as I deserved, but enough to live comfortably. Did you resent him? Resent is too mild a word. I despised him. He was cruel, controlling, and vindictive. But Mr. Wolfe, despising someone doesn't mean you kill them. Where were you Monday night? At a charity gala at the Plaza Hotel. 500 people saw me there. I arrived at 7 and stayed until 11:30. Can anyone verify that? Dozens of people. Check the guest list if you'd like. That was another solid alibi. I made a note to verify it, but I suspected she was telling the truth. Wolfe asked more questions about her marriage to Desmond, about his business dealings, about whether she knew of anyone who might have wanted him dead. She gave variations of the same answers. Everyone hated him, but that didn't mean someone killed him. When she left, Wolfe looked at me. 4 solid alibis. That leaves Constance, Pierce, if she returned after 10:30, and Bernard Crane, whom we'll interview shortly. The buzzer sounded. I checked the glass panel and saw a tall, heavy-set man in his 60s standing on the stoop. He had the look of someone who'd made a lot of money and wanted everyone to know it. Bernard Crane had arrived early. I let him in, and the dogs did their inspection. Crane ignored them, which was a mistake. Caesar didn't like being ignored. The big Doberman positioned himself directly in Crane's path and stared at him until Crane finally acknowledged him with a curt nod. We went to the office. Crane took the red leather chair and looked at Wolfe with barely concealed contempt. "Let's make this quick," he said. "I have a meeting at 5. Wolfe's expression didn't change. "Mr. Crane, I understand you've been trying to acquire Ashford properties. Is that correct?" "I've made several offers over the years. Desmond Ashford turned them all down." "Why did you want the company?" "Because it has valuable assets. Prime Manhattan real estate, strong tenant base, good cash flow. It's a smart investment. And now that Desmond is dead, now the company is in play, the new shareholders might be more receptive to an offer." "Have you made an offer?" "Not yet. I'm waiting to see how things shake out." "Mr. Crane, where were you Monday night between 9 and 11? "At dinner with clients. We met at Le Pavillon at 7:30 and didn't leave until after 11. "Can they verify that?" "Of course, I'll give you their names." Another alibi. I wrote down the names he provided and made a note to verify them later. Wolfe leaned forward. "Mr. Crane, did you kill Desmond Ashford?" Crane's face flushed. "No, and I resent the implication." "Did you hire someone to kill him?" "No." "Do you know who did?" "I assume he killed himself. That's what the police said." "But you don't believe it?" Crane hesitated. "I believe Desmond was under pressure. Whether that drove him to suicide, I couldn't say." "What kind of pressure?" "Financial. The company's carrying too much debt. Desmond borrowed heavily to finance recent acquisitions, and the returns haven't materialized yet. He was vulnerable." "Vulnerable to what?" "To a takeover. If the shareholders got nervous and wanted out, I could have bought the company at a discount. Desmond knew that, and it drove him crazy." "Crazy enough to kill himself?" "Maybe, or maybe someone decided to speed up the process." "Do you have any evidence of that?" "No, just speculation." Wolfe dismissed him shortly after, and when he was gone, I looked at the list of suspects. 5 solid alibis. That leaves Constance and Natalie Pierce. "No, Archie, it leaves everyone." Wolfe's eyes gleamed, because one of those alibis is false. That evening, I verified Crane's alibi. His dinner companions confirmed he was at Le Pavillon until after 11. That made 6 solid alibis out of 8 suspects, which meant either Constance or Pierce killed Desmond Ashford, or someone's alibi was fabricated. I sat at my desk, reviewing the notes from all 8 interviews, looking for inconsistencies or contradictions. Wolfe was in his chair, reading, but I could tell his mind was on the case. "Archie," he said suddenly, "what did Mrs. Dunning say about the chain bolt?" I flipped through my notes. She said it was engaged when she tried to open the apartment door Tuesday morning. Hennessy had to break it with bolt cutters. And Hennessy confirmed this. Yes, he said the chain was definitely engaged from inside. Wolfe set down his book. Then we have been asking the wrong question. What do you mean? We've been asking how the killer entered the penthouse. But that's not the relevant question. The relevant question is, when did the killer enter? I stared at him. You think the killer was already inside when Mrs. Dunning left at 8? No, I think the killer entered after Mrs. Dunning left but before Desmond Ashford engaged the chain bolt. But Hennessy said, the private elevator stayed locked in the lobby all night. Precisely, which means the killer didn't use the private elevator. I felt my brain catching up. Then how did they get in? There is only one other possibility, Archie. The killer was in the building already, not in the penthouse, but somewhere else in the building. And they used another route to reach the penthouse, a route we haven't considered. What route? There are no fire stairs to the penthouse, and the windows are 28 floors up. Wolfe picked up the architectural drawings and spread them on his desk. Look at the plans, Archie. What do you see? I studied them. The penthouse was isolated at the top of the building, accessible only via the private elevator. But then I noticed something I'd missed before. There's a service shaft, I said slowly, for maintenance access. It runs from the basement to the roof. Exactly. A maintenance shaft for electrical, plumbing, and HVAC systems. And according to these plans, that shaft has access points on every floor, including the penthouse. But those access points would be locked. Yes, but they could be picked, or opened with a maintenance key, or left unlocked by someone who'd been there earlier. I felt excitement building. You think the killer climbed up the maintenance shaft? No, I think the killer was already in the penthouse when Mrs. Dunning left, hidden in that maintenance shaft or in a closet or another room. They waited until Desmond was alone, killed him, arranged the scene to look like suicide, and then exited through the maintenance shaft back down to a lower floor. From there, they simply walked out of the building, using the main elevator and main entrance. No private elevator, no locked chain bolt, no locked room at all. I thought about it, but Mrs. Dunning would have noticed if someone was hiding in the penthouse when she left. Would she? Archie, the penthouse is 6,000 square feet. Mrs. Dunning left at 8 sharp every night. Hennessy confirmed it. If someone entered the penthouse earlier in the day, while she was busy in another room, they could have hidden until she left. Then who? Who had access to the penthouse earlier Monday? Wolfe smiled. You already know, Archie. Think. I flipped through my notes, and then it hit me. Constance. She visited her father Monday afternoon from 3 to 4:30. Mrs. Dunning said they argued in the study with the door closed. Constance could have unlocked the maintenance shaft access point then, or hidden somewhere in the penthouse, and waited. Precisely. But there's one problem with that theory. What? Constance Ashford is a young woman of perhaps 120 pounds. Her father was a man of considerable size and strength. How would she overpower him, shoot him, and arrange his body to look like suicide? Maybe she didn't overpower him. Maybe she shot him while he was sitting at his desk. Then where is the gunpowder residue? According to the police report, there was residue on Desmond's right hand, consistent with self-inflicted shooting. If Constance shot him, there would be no such residue. I frowned. Then how? The phone rang. I answered it. Goodwin, it's Saul. I found something. What? I tracked down the maintenance company that services the Meridian Tower. They keep logs of all access to the maintenance shafts. On Monday afternoon at 2:30, a service call was logged for the penthouse routine HVAC inspection. The technician's name was Nero Wolfe. Did you talk to him? I tried. But here's the interesting part. The maintenance company has no record of anyone named Nero Wolfe, and when I checked with the building superintendent, he said no HVAC work was scheduled for Monday. I felt a chill run down my spine. Someone posed as a maintenance worker. Exactly, and whoever it was had access to the penthouse for at least an hour, long enough to unlock the maintenance shaft access point and prepare for later. I thanked Saul and hung up. I relayed the conversation to Wolfe. He nodded slowly. Now we know how. The killer posed as a maintenance worker, gained access to the penthouse Monday afternoon, unlocked the maintenance shaft, and hid. After Mrs. Dunning left at 8, the killer emerged, shot Desmond Ashford, arranged the scene, and climbed down the maintenance shaft to a lower floor. From there, They walked out of the building unnoticed. But who? Someone who knew the building well enough to impersonate a maintenance worker. Someone who knew Desmond's routine. Someone who had reason to want him dead. I looked at my list of suspects. Thorne, Pierce, or Vale, the three vice presidents. They all work for Ashford Properties, which owns the building. They'd know the maintenance schedules, the building layout, everything. But all three have alibis for Monday night. Then one of the alibis is fake. Wolfe leaned back in his chair. No, Archie, I don't think so. I think all three alibis are real, but one of them is irrelevant. How can an alibi be irrelevant? Because, Archie, Desmond Ashford didn't die Monday night. He died Monday afternoon. I stared at Wolfe. The medical examiner put the time of death between 9 and 11 Monday night. The medical examiner was wrong. Or rather, the medical examiner was deceived. Wolfe stood up, a rare event, and walked to the window. Archie, body temperature drops at a predictable rate after death. The medical examiner uses that rate to estimate time of death. But what if the body was kept warm after death? What if the killer used electric heating pads or blankets to slow the cooling process? The medical examiner would conclude the death occurred hours later than it actually did. You're saying the killer shot Desmond Monday afternoon, kept the body warm to fake the time of death, and then left the penthouse through the maintenance shaft? Exactly. The killer posed as Nero Wolfe, the maintenance worker, at 2:30. After gaining access, they hid in the penthouse until Desmond returned from wherever he was that afternoon, probably his office. They shot him, arranged the scene to look like suicide, placed heating devices around the body to slow cooling, engaged the chain bolt on the apartment door to complete the locked room illusion, and climbed down the maintenance shaft. By the time Miss Dunning arrived at 9 Tuesday morning, the body had cooled to the point where the medical examiner estimated death occurred late Monday night. I thought about it. But who? We still don't know who posed as Nero Wolfe. We know it was someone with detailed knowledge of the building, someone who could pass as a maintenance worker, and someone who benefited from Desmond's death. That eliminates Constance, Crane, Lucille, and Doyle. They wouldn't have the knowledge or access. That leaves Thorne, Pierce, and Vale. Yes, and one of them is our killer. Tomorrow we will bring all three here and force a confession.
How?
By laying a trap, Archie. By presenting facts that only the killer would know and watching who reacts. The next morning, Thursday, I called Thorne, Pierce, and Vale and told them Wolfe had additional questions. All three agreed to come to the brownstone at 3 o'clock that afternoon. At 2:30, Inspector Kramer arrived. I'd called him that morning and told him Wolfe had solved the case. He looked skeptical, but agreed to be present for the reveal. The dogs knew Kramer by now. Caesar gave him a single wag of recognition, and Mars moved aside to let him pass. Even Loyal seemed relaxed, which meant Kramer had been to the brownstone enough times to be considered safe. Kramer took one of the yellow chairs and bit the end off an unlit cigar. This better be good, Wolfe. I've got 3 unsolved cases and a mayor breathing down my neck. It will be satisfactory, Inspector. Archie, when the 3 vice presidents arrive, show them in. At 3 sharp, Thorne, Pierce, and Vale arrived within minutes of each other. I settled them in the 3 yellow chairs facing Wolfe's desk. Kramer sat on the couch watching. Wolfe surveyed them, fingers interlaced, expression unreadable. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. I have assembled you here because one of you murdered Desmond Ashford, and before this meeting ends, you will confess. Thorne's face went pale. Pierce sat up straighter. Vale looked confused. That's ridiculous, Thorne said. We all have alibis for Monday night. Yes, and those alibis are all legitimate, because Desmond Ashford didn't die Monday night. He died Monday afternoon between 3 and 5 o'clock. The killer manipulated the body temperature to deceive the medical examiner into believing death occurred later. Kramer leaned forward. You have proof of this? I have logic, Inspector, and evidence. Archie, show them. I pulled out the maintenance log Saul had obtained. On Monday afternoon at 2:30, someone posing as a maintenance worker named Nero Wolfe entered the Meridian Tower and logged an HVAC service call for the Penthouse. But the maintenance company has no employee named Nero Wolfe, and no HVAC work was scheduled. That person was the killer. Wolfe continued. The killer used the maintenance access to enter the penthouse, hid until Desmond returned, shot him, arranged the scene, and used heating devices to slow the body's cooling. Then the killer engaged the chain bolt, climbed down the maintenance shaft, and exited the building. The locked room illusion was complete. Pierce's face was impassive. Vale looked shocked, but Thorne's expression had changed. His jaw was tight, his hands clenched. "This is absurd," Thorne said. "You have no proof." "Don't I? Mr. Thorne, you oversee acquisitions and development for Ashford Properties. That means you know every building in the portfolio intimately, including the Meridian Tower. You know the maintenance schedules, the access points, the elevator systems. You would know how to pose as a maintenance worker and gain entry to the penthouse. So would Pierce and Vale. True, but they have something you don't, a genuine reason to keep Desmond alive. Mrs. Pierce needed Desmond's approval for her operations budget. Mr. Vale valued Desmond's friendship, despite their disagreements. But you, Mr. Thorne, had been passed over for promotion 3 times. Desmond had made it clear you would never advance while he was alive. And with Desmond dead, you saw an opportunity. With the new shareholders, Constance and Beatrice, you could position yourself as the natural choice to run the company. You'd finally get the power you deserved. Thorne's face was scarlet. You can't prove any of this. Can't I? Inspector Kramer, I suggest you examine Mr. Thorne's apartment for heating pads or electric blankets purchased recently. I also suggest you check his appearance against the building's visitor logs for Monday afternoon. The doorman may remember him entering dressed as a maintenance worker. Kramer stood. Thorne, you want to make this easy or hard? I want my attorney. That's your right, but it sounds to me like Mr. Wolfe's got you dead to rights. Kramer pulled out handcuffs. Gerald Thorne, you're under arrest for the murder of Desmond Ashford. As Kramer led Thorne away, Vale and Pierce sat in stunned silence. I can't believe it, Vale said quietly. Gerald and I worked together for 15 years. Believe it, Wolfe said. Desperation makes people capable of extraordinary things. Mr. Thorne saw an opportunity and took it. He simply didn't account for the fact that locked rooms are rarely as locked as they appear. After Vale and Pierce left, I sat at my desk and looked at Wolfe. How did you know it was Thorne? Process of elimination, Archie. It had to be one of the 3 vice presidents. They were the only ones with sufficient knowledge of the building. Vale's poker alibi was airtight, verified by multiple witnesses. Pierce's movements at the office could be tracked minute by minute, but Thorne's alibi, dinner at home with his wife, was conveniently unverifiable by anyone outside the marriage. When I realized the time of death was manipulated, Thorne became the only logical suspect.
And the heating pads?
A calculated guess, but I suspect the police will find them. The phone rang. It was Kramer. We searched Thorne's apartment, found 2 electric heating pads in a closet, still in the packaging, purchased from a medical supply store last week. He also had a maintenance company uniform in his car. You nailed him, Wolfe. I hung up and grinned. Kramer says you nailed him. I merely identified the truth, Archie. The facts did the rest. The following morning, Friday, Kramer called again. Gerald Thorne had confessed. He laid it all out, Kramer said he'd been planning it for months. He knew Desmond's routine, knew the building inside and out, knew exactly how to make it look like suicide. He posed as a maintenance worker Monday afternoon, hid in the penthouse until Desmond came home around 4:30, shot him at his desk, arranged the body, used heating pads to fake the time of death, locked the chain bolt, and climbed down the maintenance shaft. Walked out the front door at 5:15, and nobody gave him a second look. He thought he'd committed the perfect crime. What made him confess? Your breakdown, Wolfe. Once we found the heating pads and the uniform, he knew he was finished. Figured he'd get a lighter sentence if he cooperated. Will he? That's up to the DA. But between you and me, he's looking at 25 to life. After Kramer hung up, I looked at Wolfe. So Thorne killed Desmond to get control of the company. Yes, and he nearly succeeded. If Mrs. Beatrice Ashford hadn't insisted it was murder, Thorne would have positioned himself as the logical choice to run Ashford Properties. With Constance inexperienced and Beatrice distracted by grief, he would have consolidated power within months. What about the letter? The one Desmond supposedly sent to Beatrice about transferring shares? Forged by Thorne. He wanted to make Beatrice think the conflict with Desmond was about to be resolved. That way she wouldn't suspect Desmond's death was anything other than tragic timing. And Constance's argument with her father Monday afternoon? Genuine. but irrelevant. Constance was angry, but not murderous. Thorne simply took advantage of the fact that multiple people had motive, making it harder to identify the real killer. The doorbell rang. I checked the glass panel and saw Mrs. Beatrice Ashford on the stoop. I let her in, and she came straight to the office. "Mr. Wolfe, I heard the news. Inspector Kramer called me this morning. Gerald Thorne has been arrested for my brother-in-law's murder." "That is correct. I wanted to thank you personally. I knew Desmond didn't kill himself, but the police wouldn't listen. If you hadn't taken the case, Mrs. Ashford, I took the case because you paid me. The gratitude is appreciated but unnecessary. The fee, however, is still outstanding, $50,000 minus the $10,000 retainer you already provided." She opened her handbag and pulled out a checkbook. "I'll write you a check right now." "Cash would be preferable. I'll have it delivered this afternoon." She stood. "Mr. Wolfe, if you ever need anything, a property, a lease, a favor, please don't hesitate to ask. Ashford Properties owes you a considerable debt." "I will keep that in mind." After she left, I leaned back in my chair and grinned. $40,000 cash, not bad for a week's work. It was satisfactory. Wolfe picked up his beer glass and drank. "Though I must say, Archie, penthouse murders are considerably more tiresome than ground floor murders. All that elevation for nothing. At least you didn't have to climb 28 floors, for which I am profoundly grateful." He set down his glass. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have orchids to tend to. This case has taken up far too much of my time." He rose from his chair and headed to the elevator. I watched him go, then looked down at Loyal, who was lying beside my desk. "Well, boy, another case solved, another killer caught, another day at the office." Loyal looked up at me with those sharp, intelligent eyes and thumped his tail once. I scratched behind his notched ear and thought about locked penthouses and clever killers and the fact that no matter how high you climb, Nero Wolfe can always see the truth from ground level. That evening, Fritz prepared one of Wolfe's favorite meals, duckling roasted with black cherries, wild rice with mushrooms, and a lemon soufflé that practically floated off the plate. Wolfe ate with the focused intensity he brought to everything, savoring each bite, while I gave him the final details from Kramer. Thorne had been arraigned, denied bail, and was awaiting trial. His attorney was already making noise about pleading it down to manslaughter, but Kramer said the DA wasn't interested. Premeditated murder, with elaborate planning to conceal the crime, that was first degree all the way. "What about Ashford Properties?" I asked between bites of soufflé. "What happens to the company now?" "Mrs. Beatrice Ashford called while you were upstairs," Fritz said, bringing coffee. "She said she and Miss Constance have decided to hire Mr. Vale as interim president. Mrs. Pierce will be promoted to executive vice president. The company will continue operations." "Smart move," I said. "Vale's steady, and Pierce knows how to run things. They might actually do better without Desmond micromanaging everything." Wolfe nodded. "Often the removal of a toxic personality allows an organization to thrive. Desmond Ashford was brilliant but destructive. His absence will be a relief to many." After dinner, we returned to the office. Wolfe settled into his chair with an orchid catalogue, and I went through the mail. Among the bills and advertisements was a note from Saul Panzer. "Archie, good work on the Ashford case. Glad Wolfe figured out the time of death trick. I knew there was something off about that locked penthouse. Let me know when the next one comes in." "Saul?" I filed it away and looked at the clock. 8:30. Still early enough to call Lily Rowan, but I was too tired to be entertaining. The case had taken more out of me than I'd realized. The 6 dogs had settled into their evening positions. Caesar was near the hall entrance, Mars by the front door, Apollo at the window overlooking the street, Minerva near the office entrance, Diana by the coat rack, and Loyal beside my desk. They looked relaxed, content. The brownstone was secure. The case was closed. All was right with their world. The phone rang. I answered it. Archie Goodwin. "Mr. Goodwin, this is Raymond Tucker. I'm the night security guard at Ashford Properties. Mrs. Ashford gave me your number. I thought you should know. Someone broke into the office tonight. The police are here now, but they're saying it's just a routine burglary." "I don't think so." I sat up straighter. "What makes you say that?" "Because they didn't take anything valuable. They went straight to Mr. Thorne's office and ransacked it. They were looking for something specific, Did they find it? I don't know, but Mr. Goodwin, I think there's more to this than just Thorne killing Mr. Ashford. I think there's something else going on. I glanced at Wolfe. He'd set down his catalogue and was listening. Mr. Tucker, stay there. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I hung up and looked at Wolfe. Trouble at Ashford Properties. Someone broke into Thorne's office looking for something. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. This case is not over, Archie. You think Thorne had an accomplice? I think Thorne had a secret, and someone wants it badly enough to risk breaking into a crime scene. He picked up his beer glass. Go, investigate, and Archie, take Loyal with you. If there's danger, he'll sense it before you do. I grabbed my coat and hat, and Loyal followed me to the door. Caesar watched us leave, and I could swear he looked worried. As we headed out into the cold November night, I had the sinking feeling that the Ashford case wasn't as closed as we'd thought. But that, as they say, is a story for another time.